3 gifts brought from a distance. That much we all agree on. When we were kids, we also had the image of 3 camel-riding kings, didn't we? Sometimes the symbol for Epiphany Sunday would be a crown. That's not in the scriptures, but we like it anyways. The camels aren't even in the Bible. That seems harsh to me. How could it not be camels? I guess for our kids, they might even imagine they're on sand dunes on those 3-wheel vehicles, just scooting across the desert. And however many there were, we know the gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The very key to the story of Epiphany. And we begin a season of Epiphany in which we're going to explore different themes. But I want to keep that image in mind of people being willing to take the risk to make a journey, to give something, and finding out, paradoxically, they also received something. I think that's a fine motif for us at this time in the life of this congregation, in the life of the United Church of Canada, and generally of all churches in the West. So you'll see the title there: Deep Spirituality, Bold Discipleship, and Daring Justice. A wonderful trilogy of images and strengths. Deep, bold, and daring. Isn't that wonderful? That describes those magi, doesn't it? Deep, bold, and daring. Not necessarily knowing what was going to happen, that they would end up getting involved with Herod. Of course they didn't. But the Spirit of God was never without them, and so they were informed in a dream not to go back into his clutches. Deep, daring, bold, and blessed, we could add in that. Those 3 phrases, deep spirituality, bold discipleship, and daring justice, are part of the new phrase to describe the dream, the aspiration of our whole denomination. They were adopted at the national level a couple of years ago during COVID, and so now the fallout or the flow out is coming to each congregation to ask ourselves, what does that mean in our context? And that's a really important thing. And so people from all over the church, all over the country, are looking at these 3 values. And of course, one of the things is, it started in, I guess, just before at the end of the teens and was decided on in 2021. What's happened in the meantime is COVID. And anything you thought about what the denomination might look like, or any denomination, any of our denominations, has been so impacted by the pandemic. And our aging congregations in all the denominations have tried to deal with what that has meant for us and our structures. And how do we maintain our spirituality, our discipleship, and our yearning for justice when we're coping with reduced numbers, big changes, and a constantly evolving, slick, and smart pandemic around us? I would recommend we start with coffee. There are so many ways that pandemic has affected us. It has affected us spiritually. Congregations have lost members. They've had to redefine who they are. They've had to change the way they think of what they can do. Do you remember, and I'm sure it was out here because it's not that different, but when I was at theological college, as my mother used to say just after the British Civil War, we used to say there was an 80-20 rule. Do you remember that? 80% of the work was done by 20% of the people. Did you have something like that out here? Some phrase like that? It might just have been the jaundiced people of Ontario who held on to that, but we kind of felt there was 20% of us doing a lot of work and the rest weren't. Whether or not that's true, she's gone to her rest. But the thing is, of course, with our numbers so reduced, both the 80% and the 20% have been affected. So what we can hope to do has changed. Do you remember, I don't know what it was like out here on the coast, we had something in the 1980s, you'll remember it from Saskatoon, Ventures in Mission. That's when we raised the money for McClure United Church. Did you have it out here? What churches were built from that huge fundraising? You didn't use it for building churches, no. Each congregation was asked to raise money. Little congregations raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that started in the early 1980s. And then bold discipleship, if the discussion around ordination of all people in the church brought that to a screeching halt. And it changed the church. But our call to daring justice, I think, got deeper rooted. Those have been three of the values we've had, exchanging priorities in my time in ministry. So it could be easy. I want to just be honest about that. It could be easy in 2023 to give up hope. To say, yeah, our numbers are down, it's getting harder to do things, money is tighter, the pandemic is not yet over, of course, so it's just hard to hold on. So our question as people of faith is to say, how do we have deep spirituality? How do we hold on to hope in a changed world? That's just the same thing we've asked ourselves a number of times before, after 88, after the ordination of women, all those different crises we've been through because of our call to be daring. We've asked ourselves, how do we do it? When I was a kid, we had something called the New Curriculum, which was a Sunday school program that was considered to be radically daring. So calling and vision have given us these three statements to help us focus our questions around hope and purpose and future as a denomination. And boy, it lines up perfectly with what we're doing as a congregation. These are, I believe, our aspirations too. We aspire as people to have deep spirituality. I love the word spirituality, but I can remember not that long ago that it was held as a lesser value. You know, when people said they were spiritual but not religious, there were people, I remember hearing sermons where people said, no, you need to be religious. And slowly, I think that's evolved, that people realize that being religious could be part of your spirituality, but it's never your whole spirituality. Spirituality is much bigger than your religious affiliation. It includes your appreciation of everything in life, your sense of gratitude, and that sense, just who you belong to, where you go to church is just a part of it, an important part of it. But spirituality has become a huge word for us in North America, one I think more and more people in the church are comfortable with, not seeing it as a rival, but as an adjunct. Discipleship, though, the second word, is a funny one in the United Church of Canada. We don't very often use that, do we? Do you remember when you were in Sunday school, you'd have all those cute little songs to help you remember who the disciples were? Because you'd have to answer the question on a Sunday morning as you have a little poem in your head, a little mnemonic to help you remember who exactly was in the group. The discipleship here, then, is a different word for us. Bold discipleship. So you might say, well, what is that meaning for us in the 21st century? Discipleship, in its roots, comes from a person who's willing to learn, like a student, someone who's willing to have an openness, open heart, open mind. And so then we're asking that we would be bold in our ability to learn new things, bold in our ability to hold our minds and our hearts open. We don't use the word discipleship the way maybe some of our other colleagues in other denominations do, but we understand what that means. We understand what it means to hold our hopes open. You know, the wonderful gift, one of the wonderful gifts of the pandemic is all those courses online that are free. Have you done them through Coursera or the Irish school, Allison? Literally thousands of courses you can take free online. And one of them that many people in this congregation have done is the one out of the University of Alberta on Aboriginal history. And there's a new one that's just started at the University of Toronto. I don't know if any of you are doing it, on Indigenous worldviews. I think that's just maybe just starting this week. So that would be a part of our bold discipleship, learning from the blanket exercise, learning from all the things we do, and letting that affect how we believe. That is bold discipleship, keeping ourselves open. That it involves a bit of rigor. It involves study. It involves looking at the articles, reading about what does it mean? What does it mean when they say the Indian Act? What does that refer to? What are the calls to action? It is a call to some rigor, some opening our hearts to learn. So that's what bold discipleship asks of us. We've been trying that for decades here. I know you have. And you've been leaders through Epiphany Explorations in doing that. But we can't put it down. We have to keep keeping our hearts open and keep being willing to learn. It's an ongoing challenge. At some point, you'd like to graduate, right? Say, well, I got that done. Now I'm going to read recipes about Rice Krispies. That's just not our option. But we're not alone. The sacred Spirit is our guide, our resource, our resilience, and our energy. We're not alone trying to figure it out as an individual Christian, as First Metropolitan, as the churches of the Southern Vancouver Island, or even as the United Church of Canada. Sacred Spirit, the cosmic Christ, universal, everywhere, constant, our hope. We're not alone in this. As we know, actions follow that open-hearted belief and learning. It just seems that we can't not do it. Our gratitude is like that. We breathe in. We take in new learnings from the sacred Spirit, but then we want to breathe out and share. We want to breathe out in actions. It could be little actions, like using olive oil from Palestine. They could be big actions, like signing petitions or starting them. But we breathe in the new information, and then we breathe out in action. We're not called to be a society of good people. That's not what we're about. We're called to be people of deep spirituality, bold discipleship, and daring justice. It's a whole new way of seeing the church, our denomination, and ourselves. So our hope, then, is that we find courage to be bold disciples in whatever way it works for us, because it will then result in daring for justice. Now, Rob Fennell is a name some of you may know. He teaches at the Atlantic School of Theology on the far east coast at Halifax. It's a beautiful school. Have any of you been to see it? AST? Yeah, it's a great school. Anyways, Rob teaches there, and he's teaches theology and history of Christianity. I think he's an acting dean or assistant dean. He wrote a little poem, meditation on this, and I wanted to close with that. And huge thanks to him for this blog. He wrote, I am not quite myself. I am not quite myself without you. Apart from you, without you, I find myself at a loss. I do not know where I end and you begin. I know how your beginnings mean my limits, the limits of myself, my outer boundaries, for I am not you, and I know the difference. But I do not know who I'd be if you weren't here. So all the logs and boulders, the specks and splinters, the vision blocked and the perception strained, my own unreadiness to understand, my own unredeemed, hollowed out insides that need refilling with you. To all this you come with gentleness and grace, with a silent word, with radiant darkness. You have found me. You have given yourself to me, and I am myself again, for I am with you. Today, this day, is a gift, and it is a good day to practice our spirituality. Today, we can seek and receive God's love and grace in the midst of the ordinariness of our lives. There is depth and joy in that, right here, right now, which we add, thanks be to God. Amen.